Hi and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's very special guest interview with Sally Norton. Sally, thank you so much for doing this and welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to talk with you.
So a lot of people in this world, like carnivore diets, ancestral diets, functional medicine, they probably have already heard of you. But if somebody is living under a rock and hasn't heard your story, can you share a little bit about your background and how you came to understand how detrimental oxalates are for everyone's health?
Yeah, well, my background is in nutrition. I decided as a seventh grader that I would get a degree in nutrition so I could be a health promotion person to help people avoid disease. Like if you knew what to eat, that was my big insight in seventh grade. Like if you knew how to eat over the long term, you could avoid cancer and heart disease and be productive and happy and not have to be sick. Like who wouldn't want that? To me, like, whoa, that's got to be job one, right? Of course, most people don't agree with that. It's a weird geeky perspective in modern life, but that's who I've always been. I mean, I was always coming home and preaching what we learned in kindergarten. They told us we needed like 6 or 8 glasses of milk every day. And I told my mom, and I'm like, Mom, we gotta, she's like, no, she's like not into that. She's like, with 5 kids, I'm not giving you that much milk. But I was really interested. I was always a goody two shoes and interested by doing right by my health. And I really think probably the seed of that started very early because my sister and I had our tonsils taken out. I was 5 and she was 4 because we had strep throat a lot and ear infections a lot. And we were on this penicillin a lot and they couldn't figure out how to do it. So they'd take out your tonsils. And I still had ear infections after that didn't fix things really. And I was barred from the swimming pool as a little kid, and that was not fun. So I knew early on that when you're sick, life is less fun. No question about it. And that gets even worse as you're older because now you got back pain and this and that. So anyway, I'm by nature interested in preventing disease, helping children, and caring about how I eat for lots of different reasons. And so my whole career has been public health nutrition and grant writing and holistic healing. And I didn't know anything about oxalates. My textbook that I studied at Cornell had 2 paragraphs, and chapters and textbooks are written by a series of authors. Each chapter is written by a different set of people. And then there's an editor that tries to tie it together. So in one chapter, there's a list of 10 foods. In another chapter, there's a list of 10 foods, and they don't match. And they're literally this much space in the book twice, one for one chapter, one like they're 1.5 inches long and the columns are tiny. So barely talked about oxalate. What I learned at Cornell, where I got my nutrition degree, which is considered one of the finest nutrition schools on the East Coast. I learned that if you have tea with dinner, the oxalates in the tea will block the calcium absorption. So don't have your tea with dinner. That's what I learned about oxalates. And that, of course, kidney stones are made with oxalate, and renal patients should not be eating oxalate foods. But we never really got into it at all. And I really had no idea about any of the stuff that I have since researched. And I had to research it for myself because my health had been crashing starting at age 12, but was progressively crashing to the point where I became disabled in 2010, had to quit my faculty job at the local university here and have a hysterectomy. I didn't recover well from that hysterectomy. My endocrinologist was trying to help me with the fact I don't have ovaries anymore and sent me to the sleep doctor because all my labs were perfect. I looked fine. I looked amazing on paper and even in person because I'm fit. And the big problem that doctors are seeing is obesity and things like that. And I don't look sick because I'm not fat and diabetic, but the sleep doctors fancy, they hook you up with wires all over your head and arms and legs, and they're measuring your twitches and movements and your brain activity. And the sleep study showed that my brain was in arousal 29 times an hour.
How is
29
that?
times an hour. So that means that at best I could get 2 minutes of sleep at a time. That's not sleep. which would explain why I could no longer work. Like, I was struggling so hard to focus, and I was doing grant writing, like really good brain work with a brain that never slept. And that's
Wow.
why I had to quit. And it got to the point where after my hysterectomy, I could not exercise. I could not read the mail. I no longer had any mental energy left to do anything. And I was completely useless. And I was like doing everything I can to understand what causes this brain toxicity. That's a brain toxicity problem when your brain can't sleep. And the literature suggests it's SIBO, that you've got overgrowth of bacteria in your intestinal tract, and those bacteria produce a lot of toxins as they die in their life cycle, and they can poison you to a certain degree. And so you have this endotoxemia that's supposed to be the main cause of sleep disorders. Well, I had all the bloating and all the symptoms of SIBO, but the test said I didn't have it. There's no methane production or none of those compounds from these supposed overgrowth. But I didn't have any other theory, so I needed it. I convinced the doctor to prescribe the drugs for SIBO, and also tried to work on the chronic constipation that I had, because I figured between SIBO and constipation, if I could fix those, I could sleep again, and then I could maybe read the mail. And so trying to fix all that, I started to look for, like, I've done every diet over the years. I know all the like therapeutic diets. I know a lot of holistic healing. I've tried them all. I've been in chelation, and I've been in vitamin C IVs, and I've done all the acupuncture and the massage, and I spent $3,500 or more on homeopathy. I've done it all for myself. And I'm an expert in holistic healing. So I knew everybody, and I knew the best people to see, and they all wanted to help me get better, and no one helped me. Nobody. And it turned out, in my quest to sleep again, I tried this kiwi experiment where kiwis help cure constipation. It was eating 2 kiwis every day, starting in like August of 2013. And by October, through my Bikram yoga, because I was still dragging myself to Bikram yoga, and that is a situation where you have exact same conditions and exact same poses and exact same timing every time. So the experience is the same, but you change. Each time you experience it, it's a different experience. And I found the changes that was happening to me. I was getting more arthritic, stiffer and stiffer, less able to do the poses over this summer of doing the kiwi. And one night in October or November, I'm laying in bed thinking, what the heck has got this arthritis going again? Because all through my 20s, it started, in my teens, I was having lots of rheumatoid arthritis flares. My hands would swell up and be very weak, and I would have trouble with many joints, but especially in the hands, where I wouldn't have the strength to turn the key in a knob. Wow. I'm a teenager. I'm 19 and I can't open a door. And so this was coming back. Like, I had been tortured by arthritis quite terribly, and it had subsided enough that I didn't think it wasn't really a day-to-day problem. But in eating the kiwi, wow, it was. And I realized that this arthritis was related to my diet. I finally saw the connection. I'm 49 years old, and I have been eating these high oxalate foods. Kiwi is a high oxalate food. And it is really bad in several ways, but this was like one of those moments where my world understanding of health and healing here, I've been trying to understand health and nutrition since I was 5, and I'm almost 50, and I'm having this dawning insight that my healthy foods have been causing my pain, arthritis, and probably fibromyalgia pains forever. And I was like, oh crap, I've got to deal with my sleep problem. And now I have to do this oxalate thing for my arthritis. This is so annoying. It felt like I was being sent down a second path I had to follow while I was still trying to solve my sleep problems. Well, lo and behold, 10 days after I started really getting serious about low oxalate in a better kind of way than I had previously tried it in 2019 and didn't understand it. So I didn't see the benefits of it the first time, but this time, 2009. Thank you for correcting me.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so this was 2013, and it was like 4 years before I had tried the low oxalate diet because I had this genital pain. that tipped me off.
Mm.
And so now I'm actually doing it better, because by now I actually knew about oxalates, because thanks to the Vulva Pain Foundation. The Vulva Pain Foundation has been teaching a low oxalate diet for 25 years, and they're right near me, and I didn't know about them until 2009. And that got me aware that all my sweet potatoes and, you know, things like kiwi, but for me it was Swiss chard and sweet potatoes, were high in oxalate, and I needed to can it on that, like not live on them like I had been doing. So when I added the kiwi, old symptoms started to resume again. And then when I took it out, not just the arthritis, but all of a sudden I can read the mail again. And like, I did not expect changing my diet would help with the sleep problem in that kind of way. Like, I thought oxalate caused maybe kidney stones and apparently genital pain, but I didn't understand the real toxicity of it, because we don't get that kind of education in nutrition school or in public health school. And there's been no conversation about it. And so I was so disturbed that someone like me, with a lifetime commitment of being healthy, with professional degrees that are highly regarded from fine institutions, and with connections in the holistic healing and functional medicine world, personal and professional connections like crazy, cannot figure out what's wrong with her. No one can help me. I couldn't help myself. I was just thinking, holy cow, nobody has a prayer of figuring this out for themselves, because there's nowhere you can turn to hear from a doctor or any health provider or professor or even academic journal that will say, you know what, if you're in chronic pain, you need to not be eating oxalates.
And they're still not interested, by the way, because do you want to share that story? If you want.
So here I'm like, now I don't have a career anyway. And, you know, my husband's managing to pay the bills. So I've become pretty much a full-time oxalate researcher after this, because my whole commitment that has been in my life since I was a little kid to help people be well through lifestyle and nutrition got a big had a gigantic hole in the middle of it. Like all the foods we trust, I thought sweet potatoes were a low allergy food that were helping me with my allergies, my reactivity, I couldn't do gluten and grains and beans. I needed a starch. I needed something safe. I thought this was a safe food. I was like, it turned out my safe food has been poisoning me. So yeah, as I done my research, I was doing free talks and reaching out, and more recently, because I'm finishing a book that's coming out later this year called Toxic Superfoods, I have been thinking hard, like, how do you weave all this together and make sense of these 22,000 articles that I've read and explain this? How do you teach this? And so the process of writing the book and doing talks I think I've developed a good enough approach to trying to teach people. And so now I want to share this with my colleagues in public health and nutrition. So I contacted a couple people, and in fact, I wrote letters to people I work with in integrated medicine, functional medicine guys, people in academia and so on, and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's a copy of an article I wrote. And would you like to have a quick email or phone call sometime? And no one ever wrote back or sent me an email back or responded at all. And then I contacted professors at UNC Nutrition School and tried to be in touch with them. One agreed to a meeting and then canceled it last minute because she looked me up online and decided she didn't want to talk to me.
And she told you that? She told you we looked you
up? Her secretary
online.
told me that. She won't talk to me now. Only her secretary will.
Wow.
And she knew me for years because I was a student there and I worked on campus.
UNC. Wow. Great job, UNC. That's fantastic. So here
we are out here in the wilderness of like real people who don't have credentials sharing stories of what is happening on the streets out here in real life, versus the ivory tower can just, you know, go along. They've got their funding, they've got their tenure, they're safe. They don't need to take risks, although they could because they got tenure, but they won't.
Right, exactly. Why do you think that is? I know I mentioned some of the reasons I thought, but why do you think that is?
I think it's human nature.
Yeah.
We are tribal and we are comfortable in our little worldview, and changing your worldview takes a huge amount of courage. And modern people don't need courage. And it's not cultivated either. It's safety, it's conforming. In order to survive, human beings have to be part of a group. You can't go off in the wilderness alone and be safe. You're going to be a lion's lunch in a day. I mean, you just really need help with finding food, preparing food, being safe, sleeping safely. You can't just hang out in the wilderness as a lonely person. You won't last. And many other flocking social animals know this, birds and dogs and all. They're very dependent on their group. And we're dependent on our group, and we pick a group and we sign up and we stay there.
So true. Yeah. I think the reason why I'm so outspoken and I just don't care like what anybody thinks or would potentially think is because I grew up in Lebanon very harshly, and as a female, and if you're ambitious or a feminist or, it's very difficult to grow up there. I never felt like I could fit in, and it was very harsh. And so many other reasons to growing up. And so I feel like that gave me resilience and courage to be fearless. So now kind of like what was the worst part of my life is probably the thing that gave me what I considered my biggest strength, which is when I am convinced of a certain notion, I have no qualms about sharing it, and I put myself in situations where I can do that. So obviously I'm independent right now. I'm doing YouTube, so I don't have to hear about it, although we do get censored still, but that's a whole other topic. But there's a lot more fearlessness involved. And I think that was great what you mentioned. I guess, yeah, if you grow up in a very cushioned way, never really being taught why it's so important to be strong and courageous, whether it's being taught to you or because of your life circumstances, they didn't push you to learn those skills and have those traits, then you grow up and you go into school and you work and you want to continue just blending in and not make any waves and not take any risks. And I think that's an awful way to live life.
I like the fact that you're talking about there was a toughness to your upbringing. The world around you was not coddling you and giving you awards for participation and telling you how wonderful you are all the time and just like accommodating all your feelings and just, none of that makes strong people.
No.
It makes soft people who really are timid in many different ways. And so it made you tough. I think that's one of the advantages I have too. My mother was like, so when the neighbor kids or their parents were being mean, she's like, well, fight your own battles. I'm not going to get involved. She's not going to like run to our defense. It's like, you just either let it roll off your back or deal with it yourself, but don't expect to be rescued with every little thing.
Exactly.
So, and that is a strength. And unfortunately, the baby boom parents have been really big on participation awards. And
so funny. I was just about to say that those participation trophies, this summarizes everything that's wrong with teaching our children how to become functional human beings that are resilient, because life can be very brutal. If you're not prepared for it from a very young age, then you stand no chance. You're just going to crumble.
You don't learn how to fail and grow from that. You just compare yourself with others and feel intimidated because they look on the outside like they're doing better than you are. And, the other reason I think people have trouble picking this up is because we're so busy and we're keeping our kids really occupied and busy with soccer and all these activities without any time to really think. And I don't think we take time to think. And if someone presents us with something that's completely not fitting our worldview or so new and different, it's like, oh, I don't have time or space for that in my brain, my heart, and my schedule. So let's just not go there, because everyone has to streamline and focus on getting their to-do list done. And there's no room for learning and discovery.
Exactly.
We're too busy being full.
Very well put, until they get sick. And this is when they come to you. So, Sally, why should, first of all, what are some major symptoms that oxalates lead to? And I guess we should also mention that oxalates are mainly found in plant foods. Can you give us a quick overview of like where oxalates are found and what are the major symptoms so that people can detect if oxalate is a problem for them?
Yeah, so in our diet, there's, the interesting thing is it is plants are delivering oxalates and many other chemicals that aren't suitable for us to overexpose ourselves to. And I want people to just take a moment. If you're really into plant eating, now your audience probably is not, but a lot of their friends and family are very comfortable with plants being benign and there's no upper limit and you can have as much as you want. And the more the merrier, more is better. But honestly, if you think about if you just went outside and looked for a plant to eat, because plants are everywhere, there aren't any unless you have a cultivated garden with plants that have been specifically developed by human beings to be edible enough that we can get away with eating them. But you would never let a small child eat your bushes. Forget it. You would be, making them puke in the mouth, like get that out of your mouth. You'd be pulling that out of their body. You would not let them do that. And yet you think you can just endlessly eat plant food. So plants have lots of troubling compounds, but oxalate is the worst because it's getting so ignored and it is so tiny and so powerful at the cell level. So the plants that we love right now are things like spinach, Swiss chard, beet greens. The beetroots aren't so good either. The nuts, the almonds, the cashews, peanuts, peanut butter, nut butters, these are a problem. Mm-hmm. Chia seeds, big problem. And many other seeds, not good. They're very toxic with oxalates and other things as well. And then let's see, the beans, black beans, pinto beans, those kinds of things, fairly high in oxalate and lectins and other problem compounds. And fruits, we've got blackberries aren't so great. The rinds of lemons, the kiwi is not so good. Figs are not great. And figs is like this classic biblical Renaissance food, and our attachment to vegetables, I think, goes along with our attachment to affluence. Because if you think about Renaissance paintings and food and paintings, there's many paintings with food and it's all dripping with fruit, grapes and apples and figs. And that's the lap of luxury, and right. That was the first real sugar that nature provided us. And so when you have the luxury of other people getting it for you, growing it for you, preparing it and presenting it to you, you eat sweets and you make yourself very sick. And the vegetarian world likes to blame the king's gout, on the meat, but it's really the sugar and the oxalates and the fruit and so on. So anyway, a lot of foods that we think are healthy, turmeric is another one, and many spices that we push are high in oxalate. If you're eating sweet potatoes, that's a big one, and white potatoes. So you don't have to be like these healthy foods. There are the unhealthy foods like potato chips, French fries, peanut butter, Reese's peanut butter cups, because chocolate is another reliably high oxalate, easily absorbed into your bloodstream kind of bioavailable form of oxalate. So anyone on like the Pringles and Reese's peanut butter cup diet, they're in trouble too. It can be the spinach smoothie diet or the sweet potato paleo nut diet or the pescatarian or the Pringles diet, you name it, we can get ourselves in trouble with oxalate. And you don't want to do this.
So what are the symptoms that people can detect? You mentioned headaches, and I had never heard of that before. So that could be a symptom.
For sure. Because first of all, the body tries to just carry along and you're going to not have symptoms a lot. But after meals, if you think 4 hours later after a meal, if you ate a meal full of Swiss chard spinach, like a big smoothie with like almond butter in it and spinach, 4 hours later, you might start to feel a little fatigue or headache, some kind of neurological symptom. I would get these hiccups. A little twitch or tremor. This is the muscles and nerves not happy because the neurotoxin. The immune system isn't happy either. You hurt the immune cells in the bloodstream within an hour, 40 minutes actually after a meal. You've already caused oxidative damage and distress to the mitochondria of the monocytes in the blood. And they are now in a pro-inflammatory condition, throwing out cytokine storms, and they are increasing inflammation in the body. So you might notice 4 hours after a spinach smoothie that you don't feel so hot or you're having trouble falling asleep. The sleep disorder that I had was the neurotoxicity effects of the oxalate in my food. And see, at bedtime, that's when your oxalate level is the highest, because if you eat breakfast at 8, then at noon, you've got this big spike in your body because it's absorbing in the intestinal tract. And then you eat lunch and you might have a spinach salad for lunch, and that's spiking at 4 in the afternoon. And then at 6, you have dinner and that's spiking at 10. And they're all still in the bloodstream 10, 12 hours later. So you've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner all ganging up on you at bedtime. And your lowest point would be the next morning after you've had an 8-hour break from eating. Now your kidneys are clearing it out overnight and you might have to get up and pee. I mean, you'll get urinary tract symptoms. Some people will get urinary urgency, nighttime arousals, they'll get heaviness in the pelvis. They'll get interstitial cystitis if they carry this on, where their bladder starts to hurt. You end up developing in various parts of the body immune activation disorders. So the interstitial cystitis is this painful bladder where the immune system cells that live in the bladder lining are sick of oxalate and the crystals irritating them, and they're on hyper alert and they become overreactive. So after a meal, when you damage your immune cells and you have oxidative stress in these mitochondria of the immune cells, they not only don't fight infection very well, they now are overreactive. So you have an overreactive situation that can develop anywhere, and it can end up becoming the arthritis or other forms of autoimmune diseases. In the meantime, your nervous system is stressed out, your immune cells are stressed out, your connective tissue gets severely damaged for many different angles that aren't fully understood. But one of them is the electromagnetics of connective tissue. There's a whole kind of hydration and alignment of molecules that make fascia and other connective tissues work well, that gets disturbed by the electromagnetic disturbance that oxalate's causing. But also, because of the mitochondrial and other kinds of distress on all cells, not just your nerve cells and so on, and your immune cells, but the cells of any tissue will start to have more and more trouble producing enough protein because they don't have enough ATP energy in them. So their basic functions start to slow down. So their ability to replicate cells in normal tissue maintenance and repair slows down. And that means your connective tissue is not renewed and it doesn't stay hardy and strong. It becomes weaker and weaker. And for those tissues to hold together, you know, there's cell-to-cell junctions that hold tissues together. And these junctions are like these protein molecules and membranes, and they kind of stick out the edges like little Velcro hooks. And so the cells would normally hook together, but if one cell dies, there's no hooks next door and the tissue would start to fall apart. So what you do instead is the fibroblasts keep going, even though there's an ATP shortage, and you get more scar tissue forming to hold you together. So you may not notice this is happening. You seem okay until you suddenly do something funky when you're trying to move your kid into their dorm room, and now you've got a broken ankle because your bones are also weak. Because what oxalic acid, and that's the main compound that's entering the blood from your food, is called oxalic acid. It's a chelator of minerals, and it takes the calcium, some of it, and other minerals like iron, magnesium, and bonds to it. So now you don't have the ionic calcium that's supposed to be there as a nutritive electrolyte in your blood and tissues. You've now got this little molecule that's a toxin. So what do? You can't have your blood drop in calcium and ions because now your pacemaker doesn't work correctly, and nothing else works correctly either. When your pacemaker doesn't work correctly, you get arrhythmias, you get high pulse, you know, tachycardia, you can get all kinds of blood pressure changes because it's also affecting the kidneys as well. And so the bones have to be called upon to replace that missing calcium in those minerals. So up comes the hormones that tell the bones to dissolve holes in them. So that's your parathyroid hormones go up. And so high oxalate meals cause chronically elevated parathyroid in theory. There hasn't been enough studies to really validate that. But what we see is osteopenia and osteoporosis because you keep having to drill holes in your bones to make up for every spinach smoothie and sweet potato and pile of Swiss chard and almond bread and even bran, like in whole wheat bread. So after each of these meals, you have to borrow money, so to speak, money in the form of minerals from your bones, withdrawal, 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 withdrawal. And over time, you get osteopenia. Now, this is really common problem. Like everybody's getting osteopenia now.
Exactly. Yeah. I
It's a
had
big
a DEXA
nutritional
scan.
disorder.
Yeah. I had a DEXA scan a few years back, and it showed that my bone mineral density was trending. It wasn't. I had a mild form of osteopenia, and that's because even though I was doing keto at the time, I was still having a lot of veggies, and I was still having a lot of not sweet potatoes, like oxalate rich foods. So it would be interesting for me to check again, and see if the carnivore diet has fixed that.
I highly recommend using a DEXA scan as a proxy for your mineral status and convincing a doctor to order that as soon as you can. And if you start becoming aware of oxalates or move to carnivore, you should do it as a baseline, and you'll be able to see improvements. And one of the things you have to do, though, is correct the acidity in the body, because the other reason the body mines the bones is because it needs those minerals to buffer acid. And having an oxalate toxicity problem where you've overeaten these oxalate foods and you've built it up in the body, because it starts to cause these crystal deposits and other forms of deposits in the body, you will have acidity going on for several reasons. And one of them is because it causes this chronic immune activation, because you've got toxic nanoparticles forming in your tissues that irritate the immune system. So you tend to have a more acidic metabolism because of excessive oxalate in the body. And during the years after you quit eating them on a carnivore diet, you're going to still have this immune engagement, immune activation, and still have acidity. So I highly recommend people use potassium citrate, potassium bicarbonate, calcium citrate, and magnesium citrate, because they all help to support the mineral deficiency and the acidity. Those are the two biggest problems that are hard to fix in the short run, and you have to keep addressing over time to really correct this bone density problem. So adding in a little potassium citrate to your regimen can do wonders to the rate at which the bones recover.
Wonderful. Okay, I do take magnesium citrate, but I'm gonna definitely go over all the supplements you just mentioned and do that. So let's talk also about the aging, accelerated aging with oxalate. And if people are listening to this and they're thinking, I sleep great, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I have energy, maybe they're in their 20s, or, why should I care right now about oxalate? Well, we were talking about that with Dr. Sean Baker in the interview. Can you kind of rehash it and talk about why everybody is affected by oxalate if you want to live long and in a youthful manner?
Yeah, there's two major causes of suffering and early demise and frailty, and they are chronic inflammation and fibrotic problems where the fibrosis is taking over because your energy is depleting and you don't notice it. So you're going to create this energy depletion problem when you're toxic and deficient. So the high oxalate diet causes severe deficiencies in children. Like if you give spinach to children, it's been known since the 1930s that causes pretty serious malnutrition in terms of iron and calcium in infants, which is a disaster for a growing baby. We've known this science for a long time. It's all there. It just doesn't get picked up and incorporated into textbooks. So it's not part of the nutritional culture, but it's there in the research, in the science. So whether you're an infant, a fetus, or an adult, you do not want to be deficient in minerals, and oxalate is doing that to you slowly. So you're getting those old person frail bones. You're also getting arthritis because it's destroying the connective tissues, and crystals tend to form in the synovium of the joints and start to decay the integrity of the cartilage, the end cartilage, and the whole capsule of the joint can be harmed. And the connective tissues you start to become easily injured, and it's hard to get over injuries. So then you just carry your old injuries around with you, and you're a little bit like not right in all kinds of places in your body. And then you're killing brain cells. In fact, this little spot right in the middle of the brain you can't get to, it's a tiny little area of the brain, is associated with Alzheimer's disease. And there's been studies showing that oxalate is very prevalent in people with Alzheimer's disease in that spot. So oxalate's collecting in your glands, including little spots in the brain, in the nervous tissue, but your thyroid gland, your adrenal glands, your sex glands, they're all at risk of oxalate damage, and it's affecting not just old age, it could be affecting whether you're a fertile man or not, or a fertile couple. So every stage of life, you'd want to not be poisoned and deficient. But the older you get, it's just that you give your body more and more decades to accumulate a debt, big debt. It's like, you know, going bankrupt.
Right. And then the wrinkles too. I remember, I
Oh
think
gosh, yes.
video on that, right? You're definitely going to start having premature wrinkles. And as a matter of fact, looking at you, can you share your age? Because I think people will not believe it when you tell them.
I'm 58 years old.
Wow, unreal.
When I went on the sweet potatoes, I clearly started aging quickly. Back when I quit my vegan diet, and I did that.
You're vegan.
I was a vegan. I was a vegetarian for 8 years, and then I was a vegan for 8 years. So I had 16 years of veggie veganism. And now I'm in my 30s back then, and I'm realizing that I was getting like a permanent zits that would stick there for 2 years. And having severe fatigue in graduate school. I was trying to like get through stats class, and I was like really fatigued. I mean, I've struggled with fatigue most of my life, but I've been raised on rhubarb and beet greens. Like I've been poisoned with oxalate most of my life, which is really not a good thing. Please don't do this, people, please. And so anyway, the sweet potato, I added them because I could no longer have my precious whole wheat fresh bread and my beans and my tofu and all this stuff. So, because I'm allergic to all of it now, it's driving me crazy. And that was the starting to ruin my, you know, my menstrual cycle was starting to get difficult from all the tofu years. And also you know, at Cornell, I was taught, you know, be afraid of butter and salt. Like butter will kill you. It's the most saturated fat out there. And salt, you're going to drop dead if you eat salt. Like, so, you know, I worked for like Mrs. Dash and gave people information about how to avoid salt in my career, you know.
Oh my God.
So I lived this like vegan, low fat, low salt diet, and I crashed on adrenal. I mean, that wrecks your adrenal glands to starve yourself of salt and fat. And so, you know, I'm in my early 30s, and I am exhausted trying to get through grad school and trying to just do life. And I'm just exhausted all the time. So I switched to the sweet potatoes to get rid of the zits and everything. And so I'm having to do turkey and whatever. And right away, I didn't notice this at the time. The first thing, I was getting these rhomboid muscle pains at night. So right between your shoulder blades, there's some lovely muscles in there that really don't like oxalate poisoning. And it feels like a knife blade, and you can't sleep. And then I was getting crow's feet. I was getting really wrinkly around here. And then I got this little spot on the top of my head that I couldn't like deal with my hair. I don't even have to comb my hair because it's curly. I just like grab it. But it was bothering me so much that I went to the UNC dermatology department and had them take it off. And I said to him, I've got these little brown spots everywhere on my skin. What is this? That had just started appearing and like everywhere. He laughed at me. Oh, that's just age spots. Like, ha ha ha, you're old, you get age spots. I'm thinking, age spots? I'm like 35 years old. Wait a minute. I'm not ready for age spots. A lot of that is gone now. And I look and feel younger now at 58 than I felt through my 30s for sure.
Wow. Yes, it's very clear that you are aging backwards. I would never have guessed that you are 58. It's mind blowing. So this is why everybody should care. You know, we all look at that. Oh, by the way, you're shredded too. I
don't really know why, but I think I'm a naturally genetically lean. I don't have a lot of adipose, sub-Q adipose. And
yeah,
I had to swim for years in order to deal with my foot pain. You know, I was really in trouble in my 20s with foot pain. I had to leave Cornell for surgery.
Oh.
I had bilateral foot surgery because the bones were broken, these little sesamoid bones under the big toe area, the instep where you step. They live in this little tendons. They're shock absorbing. They're like little lentil bones. One broke on one side, and I had the same symptoms on both feet. And I wasn't recovering, and I couldn't do much except hobble around on crutches. I even had to use a wheelchair to go into a big mall or anything that required a lot of steps. I couldn't really function. So I had this surgery, and my feet were never great until I went on a low oxalate diet. Now they're fine. But to get through all that, I was swimming a mile a day to get some blood flow in my feet and to feel better. So in my mid 20s, I swam a mile 7 days a week. And I think that I did have a nice back muscle development, and, and that probably gave me a little bit of our muscles that are somehow, now that I eat meat a lot, are still there.
That's wonderful.
Are there.
But, even if you're genetically lean, I think as we get older, people start to have additional body fat, or even like their skin, you can feel like it's different than when you were younger, and you don't have any of that, because I've seen pictures of you that are recent and it's mind-blowing, really. So it's very, very exciting. Let me ask you about, well, I guess you don't have a YouTube channel, right?
I do have one, and it's going to have more and more material on it coming up this summer. We're going to do a whole series of interviews with people that I've worked with to tell their story about how they overeat oxalates and what it's been like for them to learn about it and recover. So you can learn about like the infinite pile of things that can go wrong in the body when your basic cell function is destroyed by oxalate, where your energy level is low, you've got inflammation in cells, you're affecting the movement of electrolytes, and you're causing mineral deficiency. This can mess up any cell. It can cause almost any disease, because it's amazing. And so through these interviews, I think people will have a chance to like relate more and more, because everybody expresses the damage that oxalate does in a unique kind of snowflake way. It's the same problem where you've got something interfering with cell function, but where it interferes and how that shows up in your symptom pattern and where it starts affecting you might be migraines for one person. It might be bladder stones for another, where they've shredded their urinary tract. For other people, it's connective tissue problems, or salivary stones, or tooth problems, sinus infections, chronic infections like C. diff. These things all go away when we quit poisoning ourselves.
Well, yeah, it can be anything. If there's anything that is lowering your quality of life, don't accept that it is just normal to have those things. You're not supposed to have things like that. And you can, obviously a carnivore diet would eliminate all oxalates. Although I do know that for some people, like you do add some carbs, right? Because you still struggle with the dumping effects, which is when your body is detoxing the oxalates from the body. So that is a caveat there, right?
Yeah, and see, one of the problems is oxalates probably contributing to insulin resistance and maybe diabetes, because energy management in cells is damaged by oxalate by several different mechanisms. And one of them is it sits on enzymes. The last step in glycolysis, it sits on that enzyme. So your cells that don't have the citric acid cycle, they're really in trouble because they don't have enough ATP. So you get this explosion in the red blood cells and so on. So that's a problem. And then in like complex 2 in the electron chain, the electron transport chain that builds ATPs through the mitochondrial activity gets blocked. And there's 2 other enzymes. So there's at least 4 enzymes that give your cells their energy and help you make glucose and help you make glycogen that can be blocked. And a lot of us who are oxalate damaged, we cannot do 0 carb carnivore. It's, in fact, there's a study that shows if you stay really low sugar in your diet, it stresses the liver out, increases internal production of oxalate. So for a lot of us, doing pulse carbohydrates is critical to sleep, to energy, and to keeping oxalates at bay and dealing with the stress of this. Takes a lot of energy to clear oxalates back out of the tissues, and it takes a very long time. It continues to engage the immune system in ways that can continue to aggravate this tendency to a reactive system that's allergic to everything, or developing autoimmune problems and hyperreactivity of the immune system. You don't completely fix that when you stop eating the oxalate, because you have to undo the oxalates from inside. So it's really critical to understand prevention is better. It's better to have no symptoms and stay there. Don't wait. The philosophy is, well, just wait until it bothers you, then you can deal with it. No, you can't. Not easily.
Wow. Okay. So how can people get their hands on more resources, and how can people connect with you so that they have all the information that you can offer?
Well, find me on my website, which is Sally K. Norton, and sign up on my email list. I'm not good about sending emails, so don't expect me to like send you a love letter every week because I'm not too great on MailChimp. But we need a way for me to reach you, because when Instagram gets hacked, which happened in March or something, I don't have any way to tell you, hey, my account's been hacked, until you get on my email list. So first and off, get on my email list, read all that free stuff on my website. There's free stuff to download. There's a PDF cookbook there for people who have diverse diets, who want to still keep vegetables and so on, and know how to make sauces and what spices to use and how to use potato starch instead of high oxalate, like other forms of thickeners, or however you're cooking. That will give you a lot of good ideas, because there's almost 200 recipes in there. And you can get the beginner's guide there. And that's all you really need, is to know the worst offenders and the safe foods that have been tested, which is like the cabbage family vegetables and certain fruits, and
like broccoli and cauliflower, right? This is part of
yeah,
the cabbage family. So yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And they're variable, but compared to there's really only 4 greens to really be afraid of in terms of oxalate, and that is the spinach, the Swiss chard, the beet greens, and the sorrel. All the other leafy greens are great. Lettuce is really low, so you don't have to give up. If you love your salads and so on, you can have that. It's just that if you get oxalate damaged enough, you're going to need carnivore eventually, because the oxalate damage makes it harder and harder for you to digest vegetables, because it's so hard on the gut. And like lectins, oxalate is quite damaging to the gut. And if you persist in eating a high oxalate diet, you'll end up carnivore someday, because
Eventually,
because really then you need this elimination diet to really recuperate your innate vitality. So my website, I'm also on Instagram. I've got 2 Instagram accounts. There's SK Norton is my main account, and I created Toxic Superfoods, and that's _oxalate_book. For information about the book, when I got hacked, I needed a new account. So the book one has more information about the book, and then the other one, I'll feel freer to put more personal stuff on there. I haven't really had a lot of time to get back to that. I've been finishing up the book and trying to get a provider course together and working with clients. So I haven't had a lot of time to be on Instagram, but please find me there. Also, I do have a YouTube channel. I think it's called Be Free to Thrive.
I will link it below. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'll give you that. And there's a link for the book. The best thing to do is pre-order the book, Toxic Superfoods. That's got it all condensed down, and with a lot of stories to help explain what's going on, with a chapter that tries to explain how oxalate leads to like every syndrome you can imagine, and a whole lot of specific advice about supplements and why you need sauna and these things you can do to support yourself. In understanding this process of accumulation and deaccumulation of oxalates in the body. So Toxic Superfoods, and there's more coming down the pike, including some interviews we mentioned before. So
yes, on your YouTube channel. I'm very excited for that. Thank you so much, Sally, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to share this very important message with us. Is there anything else you would like to end with?
I'm just grateful for you and all your listeners who are open-minded, and you all should give yourselves a real pat on the back for being on this growth curve of learning, and come explore this topic with me. You will not regret it. It is amazing.
Agreed. We can really do age in a much different way than what we were taught, and we can have much better quality of life for way longer. And look at that as a positive, not like something that I'm taking out of my diet. When I look at it as, yeah, I'm taking it out of my diet, but because it's going to give me so much more, then you reframe it in a view of abundance. So thank you so much, Sally. Thank you everybody for sticking with us till the end. If you enjoyed this kind of content, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.